And this is on social interaction. Social interaction. So we've covered social structure. Now we're going to cover social interaction. We talked a little bit about the fact that depending on the social status, it really shapes our interactions with others. Who people are and what positions they occupy within the larger or the broader social structure, right? Occupying positions in the institution of the economy, or the institution of government, or the institution of education, the institution of family, really shapes our interactions with those people. Not so much personality-wise, right? Many different people can bring different personalities to these social positions, but the social position itself actually shapes our expectations for how people will behave and our expectations of our behavior towards them. So, if you look in the field of sociology, you'll see that we have an entire subdivision of sociology that examines what's known as proxemics. Proxemics, which is the study of cultural norms or normative expectations for behavior as people interact with others. And we know that the social space, as well as the formality in which we interact, is shaped by social status. Is shaped by social status. So whether we allow people into our personal space, our social space, our public space, or our intimate space is often, most often, determined by who they are in relation to us. Who they are in relation to us. And who they are in relation to us is determined by social structure. Who they are in relation to society. Right, in relation to society. So, we kind of finished on this slide where we talked about this area of sociology that concentrates on social interaction. It's known as microsociology. Known as microsociology, which is really concerned with the small-scale features of social life rather than the broad-scale features of social life. Instead of looking at how institutions interact with one another and how institutions shape the individual, we look at small groups, how interactions and patterns of behavior occur in pairs of people, known by sociologists as dyads, or in small groups, right, in small groups. And important in social interaction and important in microsociology, once again, is this concept of social status, right? Social status. Social status really shapes how we interact with each other and how we expect others to interact with us. Social status is really the bond that ties small group interactions with broader social structural arrangements. Right? It ties what's going on at the societal level to what's going on at the individual level. Social status is a very important concept in this respect. So, why does status shape our social interactions? Well, sociologists rely upon this theorem that was created by W.I. Thomas and Dorothy S. Thomas. It was a very famous sociological couple. They said that our behavior depends not on the objective, but the subjective interpretation of reality. Our behavior is based on the assumptions, the ideas, the thoughts, the attitudes, the beliefs that we bring to an interaction. Shapes our behavior. So how we interpret reality is based on what we think about the situation. If we view a situation as fearful or as dangerous, we are going to approach that situation very differently than if we view it as being fun or exciting. Right? Think about the last time you went to an amusement park. Right? The last time you went to an amusement park. There's people who love roller coasters, and there's people who, if you try to get them on, will only go kicking and screaming. So why is it that some people view roller coasters as being this awesome experience, while others view it as being absolutely terrifying? Well, it doesn't have to do with the objective level of safety of that roller coaster. It has more to do with our beliefs, our attitudes, right? Our emotions that we hold towards that particular type of amusement ride. This is not just true with amusement parks and roller coasters. It is true in all of our social interactions. We approach different social interactions with different beliefs and attitudes that we hold towards the people in those interactions, the interactions themselves, right? Which then shape our behavior within that social interaction. I told you guys at the beginning of the semester, come to class every day and at least look, fake, that you are excited about being in class. Right? Fake. Convince yourself to come to class, not just this class, but all of your classes, with the attitude and the belief that it's going to be an exciting, great experience. And I did this not because of some random belief that I hold. It has more to do with my knowledge about the W.I. Thomas theorem. If we interpret the classroom to be a fun and exciting experience, our behaviors will be shaped within that experience. Coming to class every day, thinking about making it the best, that you're going to learn a lot, that you're going to have a good time, and that you're going to expand your knowledge, will actually shape your behaviors in the classroom as well as out of the classroom. Just that belief can push you towards better studying habits and improved performance in school. If you approach class as being drudgery and boring and a horrible experience, not only will that shape your behaviors in the classroom, you'll tend to have your mind wander far more often, you'll pay less attention, you'll memorize less, you'll have less of an ability to recall information that went on in the classroom. And outside of the classroom, your study habits will drop, and overall your performance in school will drop. Not because of your objective ability to learn, but because you've interpreted that situation to be one in which it's not worthy of your time or your effort. This is true in all our interactions. Right? All our interactions. The beliefs and the attitudes that we hold towards those interactions actually shape our behavior. And that includes the statuses that we perceive ourselves in, as well as the statuses that we perceive about others. The statuses that we perceive about others. So when we truly believe that we are occupying a particular status, and we truly believe that the others in that social context are occupying other statuses, it will shape our behavior, our demeanor, and our attitudes and our behaviors towards those people. Right, towards those people. Y'all follow me so far? Raise your hands if you're following me. Great, great, excellent. So, one thing that we have to note is that even though we may occupy different social statuses, sometimes we believe that we are worthy and able to occupy those statuses, and sometimes we have no idea what we're doing. Right? We have no idea what we're doing. This is one of my favorite memes found on the internet here. It's a picture of a dog at work. He's there working on the computer, and the meme says, "I have no idea what we're doing." I'm sure that lots of you have had this experience in your life, that you've been put in a social status where you're expected to fulfill different roles, but yet you're not sure if you can competently fulfill those roles. You're not sure that you are able to fulfill those roles, and you're not sure that you're worthy even to be in that social status. Right? In fact, if you study Psych 101, you'll find that there's this notion known as the impostor syndrome. Impostor syndrome, that you're occupying a social status that you're not actually supposed to occupy, and you have a fear that you're going to be found out as a fake. Right? You're going to be found out as a fake. In fact, sociologists kind of study this notion of imposter syndrome, but through a different perspective. Through the notion that we all kind of enter statuses throughout the day, and we manage our impressions that we give off to others to make sure that they know that we are legitimately in the status that we are occupying. So, great example in the classroom, right? You guys bring a variety of tools, a variety of props, a variety of items that help demonstrate, not just to me, but to yourself, that you are worthy and that you are ready to occupy the status as a student. Right? I'm positive this has happened to me. Right? This has happened to me when I was in college. I would bring a notebook to class. I would bring a pencil to class. I'd bring my, my textbook to class, only to find that I, in many classes, never took a note. Right? Never wrote a note down. I might not have cracked my book during class. I don't think I cracked my book during class the entire time that I was in college. Maybe for once or twice in a mathematics class where they asked us to do a problem set. But yet every day I would lug that book to class. Every day I would lug that, lug that notebook to class and that pencil or pen to class and set them out on the desk. In part to demonstrate, hey, I'm a student. I'm ready to learn. In case the professor ever looked at me or ever singled me out, that they would see, hey, he has his book open. He has his book ready. He has his, his notes out. He seems to be scribbling something down. He's ready. Sometimes in some classes I would take lots of notes. But regardless, these props and items that we bring to class to show that we're prepared is a way to manage our impression with others, to show that we're kind of worthy of being in the status that we're currently occupying. Erving Goffman, a very famous sociologist, called this impression management. The fact that we interact with others in ways that manage our impressions of us to them, and that we are kind of legitimately within the status that we're supposed to be. And sometimes we're really good at it, and sometimes we fail at impression management. Right? Sometimes we fail at impression management. We're trying to show that we're a professional or that we're really good or that we're supposed to be in the position that we're in, and we make mistakes. We make mistakes. We find that, or Goffman at least found that, impression management is actually a two-way street. The people that you interact with sometimes manage your impression for you. So when you make mistakes, they might decide to completely ignore that mistake, even if it's glaring. Right? Even if it's glaring. They might act like it never happened. They might feed you information so that you can manage your impression. So impression management is both within the individual, but it's also created interactionally. Give you a great example. I studied mixed martial arts fighters. These men that I followed around in the southeastern United States had to demonstrate each time they went out to fight that they were completely fearless. Not only that they were completely fearless, but they were so fearless, so ready to fight, that they could, in fact, make the other opponent fearful of them. Now, they're just like you and me. Mixed martial arts fighters are psychologically, sociologically, biologically no different than college students. In fact, I've ran some psychological inventories and found that on things like their level of anger that they have, the level of self-control that they have, and the strategies that they use to cope, some of them actually perform better than college students. They have better coping strategies, for instance. They tend to have about the same level of anger as college students, and they have about the same amount of self-control as college students. So they're no different psychologically than you or I. Exactly the same. Now imagine yourself having to lock yourself with another person in a steel cage and with very little padding, very little equipment, beat up the other person until they either get knocked out or they decide to quit. How many of you would be fearful? Raise your hands if you would be fearful. Absolutely. And you find, just like them, or just like you, they were fearful. But they had to manage this impression. They had to go in and fight without fear. Right? Go in and fight without fear. And they actually use this form of impression management. They use different forms of impression management. They might swallow their fear. They might do things that try to get rid of that fear, sometimes stretching all the way back in time to whenever they started to train for the fight in the first place. And similarly, they manage that impression with other people. Right before the fight, their coaches would help psych them up. Their manager might help psych them up. Their other friends and family that were backstage might be giving them information that they can then use to suppress that level of fear that they have. And in effect, 99% of these mixed martial arts fighters, when they entered the cage, they weren't shivering, they weren't shaking, they weren't screaming their head off in fear. They went in and looked relatively fearless, right? Even if they did experience the fear beforehand. So this is impression management. It's not just the things that we do, it's also managing the emotions that we hold. Right? Managing the emotions that we hold. And it doesn't just occur within ourselves, it occurs in these small groups. These small groups. Right? These small groups as they interact with each other. So, I'll give you another example of how social status shapes behavior. Social status shapes behavior. It comes in the form of this particular theory known as status expectation states theory. Status expectation states theory. And status expectation states theory notes that groups are assigned, when groups are assigned a task, if you get 3 people or 4 people or 5 people together, and you give them a task to do, it could be something as simple as building a puzzle. Just give them a simple task. What happens is they begin to order a hierarchy with leaders on the top, followers on the bottom, which is typically created according to who statuses are in the group deemed more important versus whose statuses within that group are deemed less important. Really great story about how this got started, or how this theory was discovered. A sociologist by the name of Peter Berger at Harvard University put a bunch of undergraduate students in a room and asked them to do a task. And he found that pretty quickly, like within the first couple of minutes, they had already kind of created a group structure where there was a leader who spoke the most and where there was a series of followers who spoke with the person at the bottom who spoke the very least. Berger said, this is really interesting. And it looks like these have to do with the status of the students within their years of school. The seniors spoke the most, the freshmen spoke the least. So Berger put all of, a group of all seniors together and found that this process still happened. But all of a sudden, the status that they used to order themselves changed, what their major was. So Berger started to kind of play around with this idea and found that social status is really, really important in terms of shaping behavior within a group. Shaping behavior within a group. Statuses that are deemed high or important, the people who occupy those statuses tend to become the group leaders, and statuses that are low or not important, the people that occupy those statuses tend to be the followers or at the bottom of the group. At the bottom of the group. And this doesn't just have to do with the task at hand. So Berger would put people together and say, put together a puzzle. Well, sometimes the group would organize not based on the specific characteristic, who could build the best puzzle, but sometimes on the few status characteristics that were not related to solving the task. So, you can be a freshman and be a great puzzle builder. And you can be a senior and not know how to build a puzzle that's 3 pieces. Right? Building a puzzle was not really based on, that skill is not based on your advancement in an undergraduate degree. But what Berger found was, no matter what, If you put freshmen, juniors, seniors, sophomores all together, the seniors would become the leaders of the group, and the freshmen would be at the bottom. Right? The freshmen would be at the bottom. This characteristic is known as a diffuse status characteristic, not based on the task at hand. Right? Not based on the task at hand. And once this status hierarchy was formed, right, once status hierarchies get formed in groups, they actually have some really important consequences. Really important consequences for not just the individuals within the groups, but the groups themselves. So for instance, low status group members are given fewer opportunities to participate in the task in comparison to high status group members. Low status group members are actually evaluated more severely, independent on their actual performance. So you can have a low status group member that might have put 5 puzzle pieces together, and a high status group member that put 5 puzzle pieces together, and the low status group member is going to be evaluated lower than the high status group member, even though objectively they contributed the exact same amount to building that puzzle. Isn't that interesting? So not only are they given fewer opportunities to participate, even when we hold constant or control for their input to that group activity, they're still evaluated lower. They're still evaluated lower. Low status group members are actually less influential at directing a group activity. We see lots and lots of historical examples of this. You know, the low guy on the totem pole has the best idea or has the critical information that is going to either determine the success or the failure of the group, and nobody listens to him or her. Right? So low status group members are less influential in directing the group. If you are deemed low status, the freshman in the puzzle building group, and you know how to put that puzzle together, you're going to be less influential in making decisions about how that puzzle will go together, just by the fact that you are of this low status. And then, interestingly, over time, low status group members' performance actually decreases. So Berger started testing how well a puzzle builder, how well these different groups of students could build puzzles on their own. They would find that, people have a random distribution of ability. Some people are really good, some people are really bad. If you got someone who was really good at building puzzles, but maybe was a freshman, and they got put into that group, their performance at building puzzles would actually drop while they were in that group. They wouldn't be as good at putting the puzzle pieces together as they would alone. Interestingly, though, the opposite effect is true for high status group members. If you had a senior who was really, really bad at building puzzles, their performance actually increased in the group when they were deemed high status. So not only do you see kind of effects on the individual. If you're deemed low status, you get less opportunities to participate, you get less of input that you get to give, and you're going to be evaluated more severely. You also see an effect on the group itself. High status members tend to perform better than usual, and low status performers tend to perform worse than they usually do if they're deemed low status. There's this wonderful example of status expectation states theory in reality. It's this example that occurred in Wrightsville, Iowa in 1968. There was a documentary, and I'll post it on YouTube, or I'll post it on my Twitter account, maybe for you guys to see. It turned into a documentary called A Class Divided. There was a young teacher was teaching a 3rd grade class. Her name was Jane Elliot. And if you recall 1968, very important historical event, it was the assassination of Martin Luther King. Right? MLK was assassinated in 1968. So Jane Elliot wants to come in and give a discussion or a lesson on race in her third grade Riceville, Iowa classroom. Importantly, Jane Elliot notices that there are, in fact, no black students in her class at all. In fact, there's only a few black families in Riceville, Iowa at all. So most of the third grade students not only didn't have much interaction with black classmates, they had really very little interaction with blacks at all from their age at birth until they reached third grade. So Elliot decides to put on this kind of experiment where she activates eye color as being a high status or a low status characteristic. Right? So she's trying to recreate this societal effect of skin color being considered a high status or a low status characteristic. But since she has this classroom filled with white students, she decides to split the class into brown-eye students and blue-eye students. So she activates blue-eye students as being the high-status group and brown-eye students being the low-status group. It was actually really easy. She just took her third-grade classroom, she split them apart, and she said, blue-eye students are the best. Blue-eye students are smarter. Blue-eye students are better at school. They're more well-behaved. They're more attentive. They're kinder, they're friendlier, they're just better people than brown-eye students. Brown-eye students are mean, brown-eye students are dumb, brown-eye students are jerks, brown-eye students generally are not good people, and they're not that smart. Well, Elliot had tested these students before she split them up. She gave them math exams. And she found that they performed pretty well. Right? She found that they performed as a class pretty well. At the end of the day, Elliot tested the groups separately with the same math quiz. Found that blue-eye students' math scores actually increased. Brown-eye students' math scores actually decreased for that day. Interestingly, during that day, the blue-eye students were, in fact, deemed the leaders at play during the recess. So out on the playground, they were the ones who got to go on the play things first. They were the ones who got to decide who got to use the playground equipment, who didn't get to use the playground equipment. The brown-eye students were the ones who got very little input in who got to use the playground equipment, who didn't get to use the playground equipment. So Elliot turns around and the very next day she goes, oh my God, I'm so stupid. It's actually the brown-eye students that are smart. The brown-eye students are kind. Those brown-eye students are actually the best. The brown-eye students are generally good people. And it's the blue-eyed students who are dumb. It's the blue-eyed students that are crappy people. It's the blue-eyed students that are not any good in the classroom. And what Elliot found was, within that day, there was a complete reversal of behavior. Brown-eyed students had the most access to the playground equipment. Blue-eye students had the least access to that playground equipment. Brown-eye students would boss around the blue-eye students, just as the day before the blue-eye students bossed around the brown-eyed students. And at the end of the day, the brown-eyed students' scores on their math test increased. The blue-eyed students' scores on their math test decreased. Well, what did Elliot really do? She took a status, something that can distinguish people, and she activated it as being either high status or low status. And sociologists note that statuses get activated all the time. It's not just the social statuses that we have based on the institutions that we belong to, right? Professor versus student versus dean versus president. But we see social class get activated as a status. Gender gets activated as a status. Race gets activated as a status. Age gets activated as a status. Even region can be activated as a social status, right? So these social statuses can impact how we interact with each other within groups, including who gets more opportunities to participate in group activities, how we evaluate people in their participation, and the actual performance of a person within that group as they can participate.